How are you?
I'm doing great, John. How are you?
I'm doing really, really well. So
So,
listen, I'm going to let you run with the introductions here.
yeah, so my name is Elizabeth Barry. I'm here with my colleague, John Bates, and we've been working together for quite some time, I think over 7 or 8 years on the TEDx vibe, the TEDx coaching experience, the TEDx giving a talk and everything under the sun, not even about TEDx. It kind of goes beyond that, right? It's the art of speaking, the art of communication, the art of delivering a message, creating story, making impact, all of the things that we want to do, whether we're on a TEDx stage or in a boardroom. So John and I decided to put a series together to work together because we're in 2 separate states and we're so good when we're collaborating that we said, all right, let's create a speaker series where we can create tips, provide advice, and unite to bring together our brains and our knowledge and wisdom into what we do best to you guys out there. How's that?
That sounds really, really great. Sounds just right. So Elizabeth is one of the very first TEDx organizers that I ever worked with. And because of Elizabeth and some of those early TEDx organizers, I now have a global business where I work with top leaders on what I call leadership communication all over the world. And Elizabeth, we're just going to kind of riff here, I think. This is our first one. And one of the big things that's been on my mind lately is the fact that this TED format has just turned out to be one of the most brilliant things that I think I could possibly bring leaders anywhere. And I'll say a little bit about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
But, number one, to do a really good TED format talk, I think takes a few things that are just key leadership tools and really great things to do as leader. Number one, you got to boil down your main message to one single idea. What's your one idea we're spreading, right? Like that's what they always say when you're speaking at TED. What's your one idea, not your 2 or 3? So to get really crystal clear on, as the leader, what is your overarching message? And that might change over your career or even over the month or whatever, but to get clear on it now and then to stay clear on it, that's so huge. And then the other thing that I think is really big is that the TED format, if you read the TED commandments, basically in there it says you can't just come share all the good stuff. You got to tell us about the pain and the hardship. So basically you need to be authentic to really hit the mark with a TED format talk. And that authenticity is at once terrifying and also just absolutely brilliant and magnetic to the people that are listening. I mean, look at Brene Brown's talk, that first TEDx talk. She wanted to go in and erase the tapes because she had been so authentic, and it felt terrifying and awful for her on some level, which she talks about in her talk from the big TED stage. But for all of us, for me, like I just fell in love with her.
We were actually there together at TEDx watching her on stage.
Yeah, and she, that juxtaposition between how being authentic feels, which is terrifying, and how it lands for the audience, which is fabulous. Getting clear about that delta as a leader, that makes an enormous difference, So there are just thing after thing after thing that I think this experience with TED and the TED format has given me in my work with top leaders that's just pure gold and in a lot of ways kind of unexpected.
You're spot on, John, because, you're starting with the 2 things. And as a TEDx organizer, I've done 17 TEDx events. I'm just about
High five.
I'm just about to announce the fact that I'm opening another TEDx. I won't announce it yet, but I'm opening a TEDx with a workshop, and I'm going to be providing some tips with my new book called The Kind Communicator, also inspired a little bit by TED, but I have another TED book coming out in about a year from now. But you said that the one idea, right? So we're not just talking to potential TEDx speakers out here. We're talking to leaders, CEOs, executives, someone who has a message to say. And the first thing that you said was the one idea. How many times do we have an issue or an obstacle of coming up with that one idea? And it's so hard because as creatives, as people in general, our like nutshell of ideas are like surrounding our heads all day long. So that one idea, and then base that on experience and impact and how you're going to influence and what's the strategy, and you hit it on the nail. I mean, vulnerability is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I wrote a book on vulnerability for women. I have a men's vulnerability book that you participated in coming out in the summer, and I coach people and leaders on being more vulnerable in their communication, and I watch over time at how they evolve and how they become happier. And it's not just about sharing your greatest fears. Like, no one wants a leader or a CEO or an executive in a suit coming in and being like, I was afraid of this. No, that's not what the vulnerability is that we're talking about. We're talking about the authenticity, the beingness, the awareness, the inness, not the power, demand, and force, because when you have all of those things, you can't really get to the heart of the matter, which is when it lands, like you were saying, so well with your audience.
Yep. You know, I love Les Brown saying people don't connect with your successes, they connect with your messes. Your message is in your mess. And it's not just getting up and complaining or saying what's, oh, this is wrong and that's wrong. It's where did you fall down? Where did you get hurt? Where did you have a mess? And what did you learn from it?
Yeah.
Because that's truly valuable information to us, because you went through this horrible experience to get that lesson. And if you tell it to us, we don't have to go through that horrible experience, but we can still get the lesson. So,
True.
That I think is one of the fundamental keys of vulnerability that actually forwards the action.
It's true. And that forward moment is on the impact and it's on the landing. And I think that that's the key here. If you're an executive or CEO or an entrepreneur that is feeling stuck, kind of feeling icky about how your message is not landing, because so many of us try to say things. I mean, how many times have you been in a boardroom or a meeting where someone's up there and it's like going like this, and people are bored, people are on their phones, they're on their laptops, you know that they're talking on Slack or doing something, slacking off, and it really hurts. So it's such a valuable thing what you're doing, John, and coaching leaders, and what I'm doing to create that vulnerability, but to also make that impact. It's like the landing. You worked with NASA.
Yeah.
It's all about the landing.
Yep.
And also the launching, right?
Yep. But you got to stick the landing, or the whole thing's kind of for naught,
Where people are just, I think it was you that told one of the greatest stories that I teach a leadership class at a high school. And you told this story, and I told it to them last week, where you gave this talk in a different country, in a different culture, and everyone in the audience sat like this.
Yeah, Slovakia.
And you were like checking your pits, you were like sweating you were like, oh my God, my talk is not doing good. And then all of a sudden at the end of the talk, everyone was like, it's like, that's the kind of impact you want to make. That's a cultural difference, but it's just a funny story, because I always think about, it's the impact, it's that transparency, it's the insight that you could provide. And then that's the thing that's going to catapult you to the next.
Yeah.
That's the landing is the PR. It's the credibility. It's the viral word of mouthness of how your message becomes the impact, becomes the wow factor of what we're all looking for when we speak or communicate in general.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, that you're right. And that impact that I had in Slovakia, you know, I wouldn't have had that if I hadn't hung in there
Mhm.
and talked to my audience like they were great, and, you know, reminded myself over and over that I have something valuable to share. You know, I didn't ignore the way they were looking at me. I threw in every speaker trick in the book to make that great. But I didn't let my monkey mind, you know, my crazy roommate who says all the mean, nasty stuff, I didn't let that thing drive. You know, I kept firm hold of the steering wheel and talked to everyone like they were great, even though I thought they just hated every minute of what I was saying. And then I got a standing ovation. And you know, that I believe, in fact, I wrote it down here for a call I just had earlier. I think this is a really powerful equation where big L equals F of big C. That says leadership is a function of communication. And I think great leadership is a function of great communication. And I think that what we see modeled out there most of the time is not only not what works best when it comes to communicating with human beings, a lot of the time it's 180 degrees the opposite of what works best. Because I think that there are a lot of reasons for this, but I think that in business, people think they need to be more buttoned up, and they can't be authentic, and they can't share their vulnerability, and they can't talk about where they failed because people will judge them and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, that's your crazy roommate saying that stuff.
Yeah.
That's the monkey in the backseat saying that stuff. The real leaders, I think the ones that are truly effective and most powerful, they acknowledge that stuff. And they do it in a way that brings people in and connects with people and motivates them and inspires them to take action. And you know, that's what I think you and I are out to bring to the world of business and to leaders everywhere, is freedom from how we've seen it done incorrectly for so long. And the reason fundamentally it's been done wrong for so long is just because it's scary.
Yeah, people, it's the comfortability, right?
Yeah.
We're so comfortable living inside the box. You know, I coached a woman the other day and she said something so powerful. I coach a lot of leaders in transition.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I'll never forget it, and she didn't forget it. And through the art of coaching and the art of vulnerability over the last, I don't know, it's not 7 months, she said, Elizabeth, I felt like I was in a herd. And that was the moment where she said, okay, the paycheck is great, but I'm not going to do this anymore, because she understood the value of what her voice was. She understood, there's so many executives out there, if you're watching, I know that you feel this way too, where sometimes there's like younger people that come in, right? And, you know, they have the MBAs and they're young, and you feel like you're worthless. You feel like you don't have a voice anymore. They're taking your jobs and they're doing all these things, but it's only when you participate in what John is saying, the vulnerability of it, understanding and awareness of it, and tap into your wisdom, tap into your knowledge, tap into your awareness level of where you want to be, and then speaking your truth. I don't want to do this anymore, but I'd like to do this, or just things like that. And that's what we're teaching everyone from our experience of doing TED together and on separate paths for so long, because we understand that the power of story, the power of delivering a message, is not in doing something that you're comfortable in doing.
Yeah, right.
The untraditionality, that's on my list, and for writing my next book on communication. Untraditionality is so important. That's where you're like coloring outside the lines, and that's where people see art. You know, you don't want to look at everything that's so perfect, because perfect is outdated. Perfectionism is not real. It's totally
the enemy of the good, for sure.
Yeah. So,
you know,
go ahead.
I love the outside the box. I'm doing, you know, comfort zone, outside your comfort zone. I'm doing a thing. I don't think I've told you about this yet, but with 2 guys from Navy EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, special operations. And you know, they are guys who have been way outside their comfort zone. You know, they defuse bombs underwater where bombs are even more dangerous and deadly. And we're putting together a training in Virginia Beach where people will come, and we're going to do indoor skydiving in a big wind tunnel that one of the guys owns. It's called I Fly Virginia Beach. And so we're going to bring people, get them outside their comfort zone and have conversations about leadership and really empower people to understand themselves and understand their leadership style and understand their communication style. And then all that stuff changes under stress. And so put people under stress a little bit in a very fun way, but it's going to be real exciting and, you know, high adrenaline. And then see what that does, because that is, you know, that's the way that our special forces teams and our special operations teams, the reason they're so good is because they practice a lot and they get outside their comfort zone in the practice. So when they're outside their comfort zone for real in the action, they can perform. And I think that's just a really great analogy for what's possible as a business leader, you know, because it's all fine when it's all fine. But that's not when it matters, right? When it's all fine, it doesn't matter.
When is it always all fine? I mean, every day I can tell you I'm like landing a deal, then I'm not landing a deal, and then it's a big deal, and then it's a small deal, or, you know, things are constantly up and coming. I mean, they're building right outside of my building. You know, my cat's crying behind us right now. It's just kind of like you're never really in a place
always something
of comfortability, and you kind of have to roll with the punches. But just like to what you had said before about throwing leaders into a position where they can be in a wind tunnel. I've done simple things like this at some of my corporate events with leaders where I simply just make them, and they're so used to this now, but being put on the spot really makes you sweat.
Yeah, sure.
I asked them to take their phones and to film themselves and say how great they are, compliment themselves on something. And it's like, it takes the entire room about 5 minutes to just like just be okay with that. Yet they're all taking selfies.
Yeah.
So it's the art of like, you know, it's kind of like bringing that self-love into that situation, because just like you said before, the only way that you could have kept going in that talk in Slovakia was because your courage was present. When it got rough, when the temperature went really high, you turned it back up because your courage was available to you to do that. You had the self-love to say, John, you're awesome. You practice this peach and you're going to give it. And, you know, even what you said before about practicing, I came up with an equation the other day too. Trying to think of it from my coaching session. Hi, Dolce.
Hi, Dolce. There we go. Maybe we'll get on one of those cat video things.
Yeah, let's make this go viral. Come on, Dolce, do a trick. When we're younger, when we're in our 20s, it's kind of like a thing where we think we can kind of wing it a little bit more. You know, we're younger, things are like quicker. But when we're in our 40s, when we're in our 50s and 60s, we're in our adult lives. And I think that what was my equation was something like your preparedness is a marrying, a uniting of your readiness and your wisdom. That was it. So your preparedness as an adult is a marriage of your readiness and your wisdom and experience, because we have to be prepared as leaders, and we can't just waltz into a room anymore and give a talk. And as much as we could be charismatic, people want facts, people want knowledge, people want story, people want quotes, people want inspiration. I mean, if you're in a corporate environment and you're going from meeting to meeting to meeting to meeting, it's just, it becomes a mundane thing. It becomes like the March of the Wooden Soldiers, right? Oh, who are we hearing today? Okay, then next and next and next. You gotta be the charismatic leader. You gotta be the person that's gonna just be the explosive person. Even if you're not charismatic in your gestures or in how you speak. Your knowledge, your readiness, your preparedness, and how you practice something can really make a difference in the art of the delivery. And that ultimately leads to your leadership legacy.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. You know, and how I said it, right along with what you're saying, how I said it to myself was a while back. I used to wing it. I used to be pretty good at winging it, but I would get uneven results.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest about it. And at a certain point, uneven results were no longer acceptable. You know, I stepped into my full adulthood or something. And those hit and miss things were just not going to cut it anymore. And that's definitely when I started taking on practicing like I really meant it, you know, and instead of just winging it, which is much easier, but not nearly as successful.
Yeah. And I think that the idea of winging it really, John, where leaders are just kind of, they're getting lazy. You get lazy. And when you're
easy to get lazy, you know,
when you're lazy and uninspired, you're just kind of like,
yeah.
When you're motivated, when the spark is lit, when your fire is lit, like Jim Morrison said, you're really coming alive and you're really giving your all to something. So I guess that's a great message or a transition for us to say, you know, when you have that one message, make sure it's something that fuels your soul. There, as a TEDx curator, you know, I become, I'm a lover. I can love everybody. And you know this, you're a lover too, but we also have to have boundaries. We also have to have our own restrictions. Oh, hi. And I guess we'll end on this note of just everyone wants to be a TEDx speaker. Everyone wants to have something to say, but they can't find that one thing. They're like, I have a talk in me. I just don't know what it is. But I think that the inspiration or to curate the end of this call would be to find the thing that drives you. That pile driving out there that you might be hearing. I don't know if you're hearing it. I'm hearing it.
A little bit, yeah, but it's good to know what it is, and it's okay.
Yeah, make sure that is going on in your heart, and that'll create a string into your mind, and that's the mind-body connection that you can create to have that authenticity, that realness, the vulnerability, to land the one idea, to skyrocket like NASA, and to land with a nice fire.
Yeah, very good. Well, you know, so I think maybe, you know, in one of the subsequent episodes, we maybe ought to talk about what you look for as a TEDx organizer. And because I know that you just get inundated every day with people who want to speak at your TEDx event. And I think people don't understand that you run it as a volunteer. You're forbidden from making money off of it. You're giving them a massive global, potentially, platform. And you know, no prima donnas, right? Like prima donnas are not allowed. Like anybody that shows up with that attitude does not get anywhere. And, you know, what are you looking for? Like we should talk about that in one of the subsequent things.
Let's do it on the next episode. So if you're watching with us, John and I just created this from a Skype conversation or a Zoom. We were like, let's do this. Let's work together. So the next episode that we do together, I really feel strongly, and let's bring in the history of how we started and how we created it, and then I can talk a little bit about what I look for, but I can
let's just talk about how the whole thing came together, and then what people look for, some useful things for people if they think they want to speak at a TEDx, some ways to think about it, and the history of how we got where we are and the things that we've done in the past that were fun and exciting.
Awesome.
Elizabeth, really great to see you, really great to share this moment with you, and I'll look forward to our next time, yeah?
Absolutely. We'll see you next month. Thank you so much, John, for your time. I hope that you're enjoying the cat show.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. I've got my American flag here.
Cats and freedom, baby.
Yeah, cats and freedom. All right, that's our tagline.
See you next time.
See you. Bye.
Bye.